Good morning, my name is Josh from CyclonesOZ, and today on opposite sides of the nation we do have strong low pressure systems, which is going to be the main focus of discussion for this weather update. But we're also going to be taking a look at some eastern rainfall that's happening over the New South Wales and Queensland border at this time. We'll also talk about some far North Queensland rainfall, which is expected to develop early on next week. And we've also got a strong cold front on the way for South Australia, Victoria and Tasmania. All of that plus more coming up in today's weather forecast. If you are brand new to the channel, please do consider subscribing and also leave a like on the video. While you're at it, your support is greatly appreciated. So we're going to start things off today taking a look at the strong low pressure system, which is currently powering a little bit of rainfall for the eastern states. This weather system, which is streaming in from the north and the east, is currently bringing some heavy rainfall or some light to moderate rainfall, which is turning into some isolated heavy rainfall for parts of eastern New South Wales and southeastern Queensland. You can see some areas already picking up some decent rainfall accumulations over the past 24 hours. Some of these weather observations out here, if they have recorded rainfall, have recorded up to 40 millimeters, and there's a little bit more on the way as well throughout the course of today. As you get closer towards the New South Wales coastline around Grafton and Coffs Harbour, as you can see on the rainfall accumulation map, there is a chance of accumulations throughout the course of today for a further 25 millimeters, and this is in areas that have already received above average rainfall this year, so the risk of flooding is certainly there throughout the course of today. This includes major population centres such as Tamworth expecting up to 30 millimeters, and then down towards Newcastle and Taree expecting up towards 15 millimeters as well. As you get into Queensland, the rainfall becomes a little bit more hit and miss, but just towards the east of St George, there are accumulations up towards 15 millimeters expected. For those of you in the Brisbane City Metro and the Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast, don't get too excited. There really isn't much rainfall on the way throughout the course of today. Just a couple of showers here and there. Most of them are going to be clearing out by the time this evening rolls around, but there is a chance of 0 to 8 millimeters for the Brisbane Metro area. So like I said, rainfall is going to be hit and miss, but more likely on the unlikely side, if that makes sense. Rainfall will be streaming down the New South Wales coastline as well. Not too much expected, just a couple of drops. It will be slightly heavier than it is in Queensland, but like I said, nothing crazy expected there. Once we zoom out and you get a full idea of just the size of this low pressure system and the amount of rainfall that it has dropped. In fact, it has been the wettest July drenching that some parts of remote New South Wales, such as Tibooburra, have received, and into South Australia as well. It has been their wettest July soaking in quite a long time. In fact, on record for some locations. That is some great news for the agricultural communities out there, especially considering it has been soaking rainfall. In fact, I've seen no rivers go above the minor flooding alert right now. The Bureau of Meteorology was right. Flooding was very unlikely from a weather event like this, even though so much rain has fallen, and that is just great news for agricultural districts out in New South Wales, Queensland and grazing in South Australia. Just fantastic news for them. You can see this low pressure system now moving over the top of Melbourne and into the Gippsland region of Victoria. It's providing a little bit of rain to Melbourne. Probably best we flick on the radar and have a look at what the rain has been doing over the past 12 hours. You can see light to moderate rainfall, very widespread across Victoria. It has been a little bit, New South Wales rather, it has been a little bit heavier around Tamworth, as I have mentioned, and then that light to moderate rainfall hovering outside of Victoria, which is just starting to ease off into more light rainfall at this time, but a couple of drops still expected outside of Melbourne throughout the course of today. They have had a couple of millimeters over the past 24 hours out there. In fact, there have been some locations out towards Bendigo that have received up to 15 millimeters. In fact, Bendigo itself receiving 15 millimeters, so some very healthy rainfall there, and that's keeping temperatures relatively mild as well, which is fantastic after their record-breaking cold snap through Victoria and parts of New South Wales as well, so that is some great news there. Tasmania as well, expecting a couple of drops throughout the course of today, leading us very nicely onto the more southern side of this weather event. There will be some showers and heavy rainfall in places around the Furneaux Islands and the northeastern corner of Tasmania, between Coles Bay up towards Launceston inland. Expecting some good drops throughout the course of today. We could be looking at up towards 25, maybe 30 millimeters by the time Wednesday evening rolls around, and the rainfall should ease off as this cold front moves well out to sea, and we get this another cold front, which leads us on into the second part of our video. I'll just get onto that in just a second. In terms of rainfall accumulation over the next 3 days before this cold front gets towards a crossing of the coast around Victoria and Tasmania sometime on Thursday, expecting rainfall accumulations on the east coast of Tasmania to max out at around 35 millimeters. I reckon there'll be more widespread totals between 10 and 15 millimeters. I think 35 might be a little bit too heavy, but up towards up here, which is Eddystone Point, we could be looking at a few heavy drops. St Helens as well, expecting a few heavy drops to up to 30 millimeters there. there, and then down towards Coles Bay and Burnie, still 30 millimetres, but I reckon that's going to be a more uncertain rainfall. Hobart itself expecting around 10 to 15 millimetres. Again, that's a pretty good drop this time of the year. Launceston expecting a healthy 20 millimetres as well, and then parts in Victoria around the Gippsland region expecting a further 10 to 15 millimetres on top of the rainfall that they've already seen today. Into New South Wales will be negligible towards the west of the Great Dividing Range, and just a few spits here and there along the New South Wales coastline. Sydney not expecting any decent rainfall at all. Like I said, that leading on to the next part of the video, which is the strong cold front that's expected to impact South Australia, Victoria and Tasmania from Wednesday evening. Now, this cold front's actually impacting the Perth metro area throughout the course of today, but I'll get onto that later on in this video. We'll talk about this weather system right now, considering it is going to be impacting a lot more people on Wednesday and Thursday. You can see it crossing the South Australian coastline sometime late on Wednesday or very early Thursday morning, closer to very early Thursday morning, impacting areas between Ceduna down the Eyre Peninsula towards Port Lincoln and Kangaroo Island through early Thursday morning, with some heavy rainfall as well outside of Port Lincoln, where an isolated low pressure system is expected to be. We could be looking at 3-hourly rainfall totals up to 30 millimetres, so some very heavy rainfall this time of the year for there, and then the low pressure system moving on towards Adelaide, which could drop a few drops there through Thursday morning into early Thursday afternoon, but the rainfall clearing off by Thursday afternoon after lunchtime as it moves into Victoria and Tasmania. It's not a very wet system. There will be some damaging winds to the west coast of Tasmania. As you can see on the wind forecast here, wind gusts will be up towards 60 or 70 kilometres an hour, but it's only going to be a brief period of damaging winds. This cold front is going to be very weak once it gets itself to Victoria and Tasmania, which will happen sometime Thursday afternoon into Thursday evening. Still some light rainfall expected around Victoria, up towards 10 millimetres of the stuff is possible, and some rainfall for the east coast of the west coast rather of Tasmania is also possible. Like I said, up to 10 or 15 millimetres, but nothing too crazy. It's actually going to be the rainfall after that gets itself quite heavy. You can see another little cold front moving in here, but it's really large, it is, and it's going to be providing probably a couple of days worth of rainfall, a couple of days worth of steady constant showers and isolated snow pockets as well into the elevated areas of Tasmania through Friday and into Saturday. And I know it doesn't look like too much on this forecast here, but once it gets itself jammed up between the coastline, this becomes a sort of weather event that could drop 30 millimetres in a 24-hour period for areas on the west coast. The rainfall there can be very unpredictable this time of the year, and the forecast models can often get it wildly wrong. What is for sure is Friday evening into Saturday morning, some snow is expected along the Tasmanian highlands, also some snow for the Victorian highlands as well into New South Wales through Saturday and Sunday, so road conditions will be hazardous. I've also cited on the eastern weather forecast the chance of snow right through the Great Dividing Range up towards the mountains outside of Coffs Harbour and Lismore, Grafton, that sort of area. I'm not sure of their names up there. I know the Barrington Tops are also looking at the chance of some snow late this week and into early next week from the eastern weather forecast. That's a very strange thing. Quite rare to receive snow up there. Conditions certainly do look cold enough, powered by a very strong low pressure system in the Tasman to see later on next week or into the middle parts of next week. So we're going to have to keep a very close eye on this weather system, because it's going to be bringing some very cold conditions in its wake. And if you see, as you see on the temperature forecast here, conditions along the Great Dividing Range, even in the afternoon and evening hours of next week, we're going to be looking at afternoon temperatures as low as very low single digits, down towards freezing for some places. So this powerful low pressure system will be creating all sorts of weather problems for New South Wales, but that's discussion for another day. It's just brand new on the forecast at this time, so I'm not 100% certain that it's going to be happening, but still we have to watch the weather forecast very closely to the later parts of next week. It does look like there's some very interesting and bitterly cold weather for New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania now on the cards. Before we jump over west, we're going to jump up north and talk about far north Queensland. We're not interested about the temperature, we're interested about the rainfall. There is still some rainfall on the cards up there after some good rainfall that they have had over the past 5 days. Like I said yesterday, 130 millimetres fell outside of Tongue Oil Alert, one of Australia's wettest places. It's no surprise that they receive 100 millimetres on a day that's just expecting a few showers. But outside of Innisfail and Tully, they have received some very good rainfall so far in the past couple of days, and as such, soil moisture values are through the roof up there. You can see soil moisture anomalies still very significantly above average, in fact 50 to 100% above average, and up in towards the Daintree they're closer to 250% above average, so very wet up there, unusual for this time of the year. Things will be drying off throughout the course of this week. In fact, they will dip below average for inland communities outside of Ravenshoe and Atherton, but still, as you can see on the rainfall accumulation map for the next 10 days, in fact for the next 3 days alone, there is some good rainfall on the cards up there. But for the next 10 days, there is expected to be a little bit of a trough developing offshore, and that's equating to another 30 or 40 millimetres on the forecast for the Caswari coast and up in towards the Daintree as well. And as we know with weather events such as offshore troughs, which you can see on Thursday providing a couple of light showers here and there, rainfall accumulations can absolutely blow out in this part of Australia, and like I said, it's nothing unusual. This is by far the wettest part of Australia, and in fact by some measurements it is sometimes the wettest place in the world. So this part of the Australian coastline can receive some absurd rainfall accumulations any time of the year, so I'm not overly shocked at this time, but just a heads up, there are a couple of showers coming through Thursday and Friday, and then later on into the early parts of next week we're looking at a little trough developing offshore, which could be providing some light to moderate rainfall for locations between the Daintree rainforest down towards Bowen, Mackay and Airlie Beach, and that includes Cardwell, Cairns and Townsville as well. It shouldn't be a long-lasting weather event, just a day or so at the tops, and it looks like it's going to be happening next Tuesday. It is reciprocated amongst the forecast models, however the GFS calling for its development sometime a little bit later on and a little bit further offshore. The Axis G3 also calling for its development about 24 hours beyond what the Eastern Rift is calling for it to occur and a little bit further offshore as well. But in terms of rainfall accumulation, it's a fairly constant number between 30 and 40 millimetres amongst the forecast models. I mean, the GFS isn't calling for that, but it's a low resolution model, so it's very hard to get an accurate picture. But between the Eastern Rift and the Axis G3, there's a very good congruency with how much rainfall is expected for those in far North Queensland, which is a big percentage of my viewer base. Hello to all of you. But there is a little bit of rainfall coming through in the early parts of next week, and just make sure you're watching those rivers, because like I said, or have said in previous updates, any further rainfall up there is going to be causing big problems, especially if you're talking about 100 millimetres falling in a day, which I'm not calling for at this time, but considering this is the wettest part of Australia and rainfall accumulations can blow out, just stay safe around the riverbeds up there, because it does look like a little bit more rainfall is on the cards. In terms of other interesting weather events around the nation, it looks relatively dry across the centre as well, and that leads us nicely over west. We're going to be talking about some heavy rainfall that's set to impact the Perth metro area throughout the course of today. And you can see on the satellite picture here, it doesn't look all too powerful at this time, but this cold front here is starting to sweep up from the south. It's already providing some very strong wind gusts to the southwest capes if this satellite imagery wants to comply and load properly. You can also see some thunderstorms already embedded in this cold front here, and it's starting to blow up some nice convection up towards the north, so it certainly looks like some heavy rainfall is on the way. Augusta or Cape Leeuwin actually already gusting up towards 70 kilometres an hour, and there is a severe weather warning current for all of the lower west and the southwest regions as well for damaging winds throughout the course of today. And I do think one for heavy rain is also possibly warranted. There's already been falls up to 20 millimetres just from showers that have been streaming through. The rainfall already starting to pick up for some locations around the southwest capes, and it's going to be a couple of hours still for it to pick up around the Perth metro area. We'll dive straight into the details right now as this radar loop loads through. And you can see, well, that's not what we want. That's later next week. A line of showers and thunderstorms embedded in this cold front that's going to be moving through up towards the Perth metro area, colliding with the southwest cape sometime early this afternoon, and then later on this afternoon, coinciding as usual with the evening commute, it seems. So make sure you're taking extra care on those roads. Heavy rainfall or isolated pockets of heavy rainfall, but a big strip of moderate rainfall and some very strong winds expected to be streaming in through this evening around 6 or 7 p.m, depending on whereabouts you are in Perth. Moving up further north into the northern suburbs by around 8 or 9 p.m, and some very heavy rainfall colliding into the Perth Hills as well. It looks like it's going to be an evening towards a night of moderate to heavy rainfall for some locations. Those winds hopefully dying off at around midnight before those showers come through later on tomorrow morning. And it looks like it's going to be a pretty wet start to Wednesday. In fact, a pretty wet end to Wednesday as well, with those showers hanging around until about 3 or 4 p.m. But this does look like a pretty strong cold front. Make sure you spend this morning, if you are around Perth and you are at home, getting your washing done. It's perfect conditions considering the wind is strong and still a little bit of sun is out, but battening down the hatches as well, making sure you've got no outdoor furniture that's going to fly around in a weather event like this, because it does look like a pretty strong cold front is on the way. Like I said, in terms of wind gusts over the next 24 hours, we're expecting wind accumulation, or the strongest wind gusts, I should be saying, to be around 70 or 80 kilometres an hour around the Perth metro area, up towards 80 around Rottnest Island. The Southwest Cape's expecting wind gusts up towards 90 to 100 kilometres an hour. Spoiler alert, they're already approaching 100 kilometres an hour at Cape Leeuwin. They've had wind gusts up to 98 kilometres an hour in the past hour, so very strong wind gusts there, stronger than expected. Along the south coast, extending towards Albany and as far out as Bremer Bay, looking at wind gusts up towards 70 to 80 kilometres an hour as well, and some locations between Northcliffe, Windy Harbour and Walpole expecting gusts up towards 100 kilometres an hour as well. The Wheatbelt also expecting some good gusts down towards Katanning and even inland out towards Merredin and Killarney, looking like wind gusts up towards 60 to 70 kilometres an hour, well into gale force there as well. And that coincides with some pretty good rainfall too over the next 24 to 36 hours. I know it's a 3-day accumulation here, but pretend it's the next 36 hours. There's no rainfall expected after this front. For the Perth metro area, we're looking at up towards 25 to 30 millimetres. I think the Bureau of Meteorology calling for 30 millimetres might be a little bit on the bullish side. I'd not be surprised if a location or two, especially in the hills, picks up 60 or 70 millimetres from this weather event. So just a heads up, if you are around Kalamunda or Armidale or Bickley, that sort of area, there is the chance of up to 60 or 70 millimetres from this weather event, but I reckon the majority of accumulations will be between 15 and 25 millimetres. Along the Darling Range as well, expecting some pretty good rainfall too. And interestingly, there's a nice belt of rainfall streaming in from the north on the forecast here. I do believe that happened sometime later this afternoon and evening. I don't really see it on the satellite imagery right now. It looks like this little band here, but the forecast is suggesting for some heavy rainfall to stream in up in the north between Carnarvon and Geraldton, and that could be equating to some accumulations up towards 25 millimetres as well. Unfortunately, it looks like a lot of the wheat belt misses out in the good rainfall here. It's going to be the extreme western parts towards the west of Great Southern Highway. I imagine they get the good rainfall, but yeah, it looks even like York picking up a healthy 15 millimetres, but as you get further out down towards Wandering and Narrogin, you're only looking at up towards 10 millimetres, and the rainfall very hit and miss as you get further into the wheat belt. But if you go to the 10-day rainfall accumulation, the rainfall does look a little bit healthier out and towards the wheat belt as well, and it looks very healthy along the Perth coastal plain. What's driving this? Well, a strong cold front is expected to be coming in sometime early next week. Now, this is a pretty certain event. It looks like the forecast models have been behind this for the last couple of days, and I've got no hesitation in calling for this on the forecast here. It looks like a pretty strong one. However, it isn't reciprocated amongst the forecast models as much as it was yesterday. The Axis G3 is still calling for this strong cold front to be coming through, but it's really only the Eastern Gulf that's calling for this really strong cold front to be coming through late next Tuesday or early next Wednesday, the 17th of July. It's going to have embedded thunderstorms in it, and like I said, it is an uncertainty on the forecast at this time, but considering it's been hanging around for the last couple of days, I'd not be surprised if it does make it into tomorrow's forecast from the Bureau of Meteorology. I do think that we're looking at a strong cold front with some heavy rainfall and damaging winds sometime later on next week, especially considering it is peak winter season at this time. We should be expecting cold fronts like this on a weekly basis, so I would not be surprised. But this cold front, if it does materialise, it's going to be dropping some very heavy rainfall up towards 100 millimetres of the stuff for some areas, especially along the south coast, up to 100 millimetres there, but a lot of that is going to be offshore and quite unpredictable. The GFS forecast model, however, being very uncertain with what rainfall it's calling. It's calling for an absolute mess in terms of what looks to be tropical moisture up towards Kalbarri, so I'm going to discount the GFS as a reliable forecast model, but it still looks like more rainfall is going to be streaming into the Murchison and the Gas. For those up there, it does look like some good rainfall is still going to be continuing, especially for those travelling. You might want to get yourself a little bit further inland before those roads get shut off if they haven't already. The Axis G3 calling for a very similar accumulation map from the Eastern Bev, so I do have good hopes in terms of how much rainfall is going to be coming, and that being over the next 10 days up towards 50 millimetres for the Perth metro area, about 30 millimetres from the front tonight, and it looks like a possible 20 millimetres from the front sometime next week. I've probably made that sound very confusing. If you've got any questions or comments on that weather event, plus any happening around Australia, please do leave them in the comment section down below. In terms of a general weather outlook for Australia, there really isn't an awful lot going on at this time. There's just those two main cold fronts fronts and a couple of other interesting weather systems that are on the horizon. But you can tell I'm once again pretty much cherry picking for things to talk about because the weather scene has calmed down once again. But if you are enjoying these weather updates, then please do leave a like on the video and also subscribe if you haven't already. Your support is greatly appreciated. Nearing on 20,000 subscribers, 20,000 of you, that is a huge number and a milestone that I aim to hit by the end of the year. So if you want to be a part of that, then please do hit the subscribe button. Like I said, your support is greatly appreciated. If you want any questions or comments about the Australian weather scene, leave them in the comments section down below as well. I'd be happy to get back to them throughout the course of today. If I sound a little bit unwell, well, I am on the mends. It does look like it was a one-day thing that I did have. It really hammered me. I suffered from a pretty intense migraine last night. That was not fun while I was researching for today's video as well. So that was not fun at all, but this one came out as normal. So thank you so much for watching. Any feedback, like I said, leave it in the comment section down below. But that is all from me today, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.